A community in Indiana is in mourning after a beloved school employee is gunned down by her husband while their daughter continues fighting for her life. The horrific shooting happened on November 29th when authorities responded to a call about a domestic disturbance at a home in Portage, Indiana. According to reports, the caller reported her father was drunk and throwing items in the home. The caller was identified as 21-year-old Haley Manville, the daughter of 45-year-old Charles Manville. The terrifying call only got worse when the 911 operators reportedly heard Charles yelling in the background, "Everyone's going to die." And shortly after, bullets rang out. When officers arrived to the Manville home, they heard more gunshots from inside the house. But when police forced their way into the home, they discovered a horrific scene. Haley's mother, Brandy, was found dead, as well as her father, Charles, while Haley herself sustained life-threatening injuries. She was rushed to a local hospital and later airlifted to a trauma center. Police learned Charles killed his wife and attempted to kill his daughter before turning the gun on himself. Investigators reportedly said a motive for the shooting was unclear, but according to online court records, Brandy filed for divorce from Charles back in July of this year, and the two were scheduled to appear in court on December 16th for a hearing. We also learned Charles has been in trouble with the law before for alcohol-related incidents. Online records show he has been arrested twice in the past for driving while intoxicated. The shocking shooting has left their entire community devastated. Brandy had been a beloved staff member of the Portage High School community for more than a decade, and according to those who knew her, Brandy had touched the lives of countless students and staff. The school district where she worked issued a statement writing, quote, "Brandy always gave a welcoming smile to all visitors to the main office, offering many of our students a listening ear and words of encouragement each day." Portage High School principal Michael Stills also spoke about the impact Brandy had on the school, writing, "I have 2,200 kids. Almost every one of them knew who Mrs. Manville is." In addition to the community and school suffering a horrific loss, the shooting left the Manville children without their parents. Brandy's best friend launched a GoFundMe campaign to help support Haley and her brother Ethan, while highlighting Brandy with no mention of Charles. According to the GoFundMe page, quote, "She was the absolute best mother in the world to her children. There was nothing in this world that meant more to her than Ethan and Haley. Being a mother was her favorite job, and she was the best person for it. Her children always felt her love and knew they had her in their corner." Unfortunately, Brandy was taken from us way too soon in a senseless act of domestic violence that none of us will ever be able to comprehend or recover from. Our hearts are broken, and we will forever have a hole in our hearts. A truly devastating and shocking case. So I want to bring on crime victims' rights attorney and former prosecutor Elizabeth Parker. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me today. As I just mentioned, this is really a horrific case, and now the Manville's children are left without their mother because of their father's actions. What's your reaction to this case?
It's such a tragedy, such a devastating tragedy, not only for the family, the children, but the community as a whole. It's something that is so difficult. These domestic incidents are so difficult to wrap your head around, to even comprehend, to understand how a husband could shoot his wife, could shoot his daughter, could basically annihilate his entire family and have that much hatred and evil intent towards a family member. It's just truly unconscionable.
And police are reportedly still working on a motive, but according to online records, Brandy Manville filed for divorce from her husband months ago, and there was a hearing set for a couple weeks from now. How much of the divorce do you think played into what happened?
Well, when I looked at the timing, the filing of the divorce case was in the middle of July, and I looked at the timing of the the hearing that's coming up, the dissolution hearing, and that's scheduled for December 16th. And oftentimes we see around the holidays, we will see a triggering moment where the perpetrator realizes this is my last holiday with my family. This is maybe my last holiday where we will be together, and something kind of sets them off. So I think the divorce, I think the filing of the divorce, I think the impending court date was very crucial here.
And also, there's this other aspect too that the father was allegedly drunk when all of this was happening. How much do you think alcohol also played a role in what had happened?
it's interesting in these domestic incidents, we see certain risk factors that come up time and time again. We see jealousy, we see possessiveness, we see allegations of infidelity, perceived either real or not real. We oftentimes see drug and alcohol abuse. We see access to firearms. We see the same things time and time again. And then we always see the the old adage or the line, if I can't have you, then nobody else can. And that really seemed to hold true here. And oftentimes we also see in these cases, which is really sad, but the perpetrator feels that oftentimes the children or a child, as in this particular case, is somehow siding with the other parent, and so therefore they look at the child almost as an enemy also. And that seems to maybe be what came into play here, which is just absolutely awful that not only does she lose her father and mother in the same day, but now she's fighting for her own life.
Yeah, and I also want to ask you this. Had the suspect in this case, Charles Manville, survived his injuries, in your opinion, what kind of charges would he have faced? And if this case would have went to trial, what does prosecuting a domestic violence case look like compared to maybe a random act of violence case?
Domestic violence cases are oftentimes very difficult to prosecute when you have a victim that's alive, because oftentimes the victims don't want to cooperate. This is their family, this is their life, this is what has become their new normal. The violence in their home, and they're so isolated from their family and friends. So we don't know what kind of history of domestic violence that there was in this particular case, but you can rest assured that this was not the very first time that he'd been violent, that he'd made threats, that he'd waved a gun around, that he'd been drunk. That this can't be the first time that that happened. So that the charges that he would be facing, had he survived, would have been murder, whether it was first degree and it was intentional and premeditated, or whether it was manslaughter, which is something kind of that happens in the act of violence and just happens in the moment. That would depend on the facts and circumstances. If there was any kind of suicide note, if he had told anybody, if he had said anything else, and if the daughter is able to actually talk about and give a statement to police and talk about what was going on in the home right before the moments that he pulled the trigger.
This is truly a devastating and heartbreaking story, but I want to quickly give thanks to our sponsors that help us continue to bring you these stories like Odoo. I'm sure a lot of you watching this might be business owners or thinking about starting a side hustle. Well, Odoo can help. Odoo is a free all-in-one business management software with tools to help you run your business. I mean, look, I'm a cat mom. I want my cat to get some brand deals. Using Odoo's website builder, I built a site for my cat Buttons in just minutes, thanks to easy tools like AI copywriting and drag and drop features. 5 minutes later, boom, check it out. I now have buttonsthecat.com. So I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring our videos, and for our amazing viewers, you can start building your site now and get a free domain for the first year with our link, odoo.com/lcnews17. Again, that's odoo.com/lcnews17 to try Odoo now for free. Yeah, and speaking with victims of situations like this, I can't even imagine what they're going through. But in your experience, what is it like hearing from them and hearing from victims in cases like this?
It's just absolutely heartbreaking and heart-wrenching. And I mean, I've had victims that have gone through horrific incidents like this and survived and not been able to even leave their home. The anxiety, the fear, when the perpetrator even is in jail, and the perpetrator oftentimes will do everything they can to continue to control that victim, including calling from jail, sending messages, sending letters, sending people to their homes to scare them, to keep them quiet. But every single time, these victims are terrified of their life, terrified of what's going to happen if they cooperate with the prosecution, terrified that what if the jury doesn't believe their story? What if the jury doesn't believe their evidence and he walks free? and then here they are, he's going to come back and finish the job for sure. So it is, for a victim to cooperate, it is difficult, it is scary. The criminal justice system is overwhelming in and of itself to be a victim, much less a victim of domestic violence, when there's all these other extraneous factors pulling, children, families, homes, how do they pay the bills? There's so many other factors that go into these domestic violence cases that make it so difficult for the victims.
Yeah, and in your opinion, is there any justice that can happen in a case like this where both the victim, or excuse me, both the suspect and the victim are dead, but then you still have a living victim, of course, that being the Manville's daughter? Is there any type of justice that she can get in this horrible and tragic case?
It's it's terrible because she's going to live with survivor's guilt. She's going to live with the difficulty of knowing what her father did to her mother, losing both of her parents. um there's really no justice that she can get. I mean, there's some sort of victims compensation to help pay, medical bills, but beyond that, they're going to be left with an absolute mess where they're going to have to go through the probate court and deal with the estate and whatever is left in assets for the family, whatever is left in terms of liabilities or in terms of what is owed. It's going to be years of difficulty beyond just the physical recovery for Haley. It's going to be horrible, and there's really no justice that she can get.
Yeah, just horrible all around. In your opinion, do you think that there were warning signs before? And also, in your opinion, how hard is it to intervene in domestic violence situations?
It's really so difficult to know what goes on behind closed doors. Sometimes these cases happen and it's a surprise to absolutely everyone, because oftentimes, there are certain people that are very strong, and it sounds like, from all accounts, Brandy Manville put up the bravest face, and she was the kindest, most wonderful human being. People may not have known what was going on in her life. It sounds like she was strong for her children. She was strong for those she worked with. So maybe there was no opportunity to intervene, but there's an opportunity now for the conversation to begin in the community and to begin in that school that she worked in, to talk about domestic violence, to offer counseling to these kids, and to be able to have the conversation about the signs to recognize. When there may be domestic violence in some of the children's home there, when you see, jealousy, you see possessiveness, you see isolation from friends and family, you see people getting violent, and you look for the physical signs. It's difficult to intervene when you're a friend. It's difficult to intervene when you're a family member, unless the victim wants to cooperate, unless the victim wants to go to the police. But there are certain things in place. There are certain laws that can protect victims, restraining orders, or they call them orders of protection. There's also the ability, if somebody has mental illness or is showing signs of suicide, or that they are a danger to themselves and others. In Indiana, the state in which the Manvilles lived, there is the ability for law enforcement to take away guns, to take away firearms from a person. But those are all very difficult things to do, and the victim has to want to come forward and has to want to be brave, and that's a really, really difficult ask.
Yeah, just a horrible and tragic case all around. And of course, we're thinking about Haley as well as her brother Ethan through this terrible and difficult time. Elizabeth, I want to thank you so much for your insight into this case. Before we sign you off, though, is there anything else you would like to add?
Just that this is just such a horrible, horrific tragedy, and you know, just be vigilant around the holidays. We see these types of things happen, and it's just such a horrific event. Keep the family in our thoughts and prayers, and the community needs to really come together for these two children that survived this horrific incident, and be there for them.
All right. Again, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time and insight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to meet you.
The road ahead for the couple's daughter, Haley, is still long, but at this time she remains in the hospital in stable condition. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.